Hello and welcome to another episode of Fellowship in Essential Oils. Today we're looking at an essential oil that's rather understated, but from one of the most generous essential oil plants there are on this planet. We're talking about an oil from the bitter orange tree that gives us bitter orange from the fruit, neroli from the blossoms, but we're not talking about them. We're talking about an oil that comes from the leaves known as petitgrain. How are you today, Liz?
I'm not bad, thank you. I'm looking forward to talking about petitgrain because I do like a bit of petitgrain.
Yes. Now, we should kind of clarify as well, although mainly when people refer to petitgrain, they are looking at the oil that's gifted from the leaves and the twigs of the bitter orange tree. You can actually get a petitgrain oil from pretty much any citrus, can't you?
Yeah, that's right. So actually, we should say that yes, it's leaves and twigs, but also buds, the buds of the
Mm.
leaves, and that's where the name comes from. So petitgrain, little seed. So the little buds look like seeds, petitgrain.
Yeah.
But you're quite right. Any kind of citrus plant makes a petitgrain oil, and there are some really beautiful ones, and I'm going to do a bit of a plug for Fragrant Earth in the UK because they do incredible ones if you want to explore them. But the usual one, if somebody says they're talking about petitgrain oil, we'll say petitgrain now. They're talking about bitter orange, yeah.
Yeah. And I must admit, we were talking about it late in last year, and you told me about all the different ones. So they only arrived about a week or so ago, and I think I've got lemon, Combava, and tangerine. And what I was surprised about is they're probably more diverse than the citrus fruit oils in their aromas. Does that make
Yes,
sense? Yeah.
yeah, it does, and that was what struck me too. I was expecting them to be kind of just a bit like a wishy-washy, powdery kind of, like a vague, almost like eau de toilette fragrance
Yeah.
when I got them. But no, they're so strong and vibrant, aren't they? They're very
Yeah.
happy oils, all of them, aren't they?
Very much so. I think I'd be more confident actually picking if we did a blind test, picking the different petitgrains compared to picking the actual fruit oils. Tangerine might smell a bit like orange, like and so on. So yeah, no, absolutely amazing. But when we look at the chemistry of them, they're quite similar, aren't they? All the petitgrains.
I think so. I mean, to be honest, it's not something I have sat down and studied, but I would presume so. But I think I always write when I'm writing about petitgrain that it's almost impossible to talk about petitgrain without saying it's like such and such. It's like such and such. And that's kind of almost like a theme of it, like it's a mimicker, like an echo, or perhaps given that it's like the buds and the twigs, maybe a foreshadowing of what is to come, that it will remind you of something else, almost a bit like deja vu. But so like it smells like neroli, only stronger.
Mm.
Its actions in terms of, well, we'll talk about like manifestation later. Orange is a manifestation plant, that beautiful, like abundance and attracting. And it has that same kind of abundance note as bitter orange does. But also, perhaps the most strange thing about it is chemically, it's almost identical to lavender, even though it smells entirely different. So you think probably the most important thing that petitgrain does is be a lavender, which is a strange thing to say, but it is. So if somebody doesn't like lavender, or if you've got a blend where you think, oh, lavender's just not doing it here, then it's a tremendous substitute, and I don't mean like a replacement because you haven't got lavender. It's like like interchangeable because it's got such huge amounts of linalool and linalool acetate, which we'll talk about in a minute. But also from a skin healing point of view, it's a real magical plant as well, and we can get into the chemistry of that. So yeah, this idea of like it's almost like an impressionist, if you like.
Yeah.
It can really. What are the birds that mimic things?
Oh, the lyrebird.
Yes, yeah. So it's like the lyrebird of the plant kingdom. It can mimic lots of things. Yeah.
Yeah. No, in our circles, we call it lavender for men. And I think it is one for, a lot of people when they get into essential oils, they know lavender is good for the bedroom. So they want to use it in the bedroom, but then they have that thing called a husband. And husbands don't want that florally lavender. And that's where petitgrain can be a really great substitute. It is used in a lot of male fragrances. So I think, yeah, it definitely has its place in a whole range of ways, like you said.
Yeah, it's brilliant from that point of view. So that's where your important aspects of petitgrain come in. It's a strange one because we don't have. I can't think of a single clinical trial that says petitgrain can do this. You should use petitgrain for that. Anecdotally, there's lots, obviously, but actual clinical trials. But in some ways, we don't need them because there is so much work done into linalool, into linalool acetate, that we can say, well, okay, because it has that constituent, we can expect that it will have those kind of properties. And of course, all that does is verifies how it's been used for centuries. But I think probably the most important thing that we know about linalool acetate and linalool is that it will give us a really good indication of how it will work for stress. And of course, stress is one of those words that we kind of bandy about, but now we understand it's so deleterious to health, the terrible things that stress can do to the body. So if we think about the idea of fear from a physiological point of view, in our brain, the amygdala registers fear, and it will go through and keep alerting the rest of the brain that something is afoot. And as it does, it will send messages to the hypothalamus, to the pituitary, to the adrenals, and keep sending out stress hormones into the body. And if we are in a stressful situation, short term, that's really helpful because it changes our physiology so that all of the extraneous systems lose their capability to secrete hormones, and everything goes towards being able to run faster, jump up a tree higher, and so the muscles take it. But what that means is things like the skin and stuff that are not needed to be able to have us in survival mode will really struggle. But also, short term, cortisol, which is the main stress hormone that's secreted, is anti-inflammatory. But after a while, what happens is that turns on its axis and has this inflammatory approach right through the body. And this is why we have more pain, for example, that we become tetchy. All of those things come from this inflammatory process. Now, what's interesting about the amygdala is it works in tandem with another part of the brain called the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, or the VMPFC. And it's like, I'm very stressed, and the VMPFC goes, yes, but have you thought about this? There's an explanation to this. You can calm down. And it goes, okay. No, but what about this? Yeah, but calm down, calm down, calm down. And I always used to use my husband and I as an example of this, that I would be like, this is going on. And he'd go, yeah, but this is, no, they'd be a bit practical here. But after a while, I'm just like, but no, it's not like that. And he goes, whatever. And he goes off in the shed and leaves me to it. And the VMPFC does do that after a while. It just goes, do you know what? I can't be bothered with your stress anymore. You just carry on because you're not listening anyway. And it disappears and it switches off. When that happens, the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part that's supposed to calm us down, the rest and restore, can't trigger. So somebody who has been in long-term stress for a long time is in this like downhill cascade where they can't stop. They're on the roller skates and there's nothing to stop them. However, linalool acetate and linalool are both proven to interact with what's called the 5-HT1A receptors, which are part of the nervous system that switch the parasympathetic back on again. So this is why most people get a really good response from lavender very quickly, because we have this off switch that goes on. And as you say, a lot of people don't like lavender, men particularly not into lavender. So being able to use this in a different way with petitgrain is really, really helpful to stress. So we have this relaxation, but also right through the body, we have this cascade of calming everything down, bringing the inflammation down, bringing all of the stress hormones, calming all the neurotransmitters down just by introducing linalool acetate and linalool, which can be lavender or it can be petitgrain.
And
or
I guess
actually, lots of other oils as well with linalool in it, of course, yeah.
And I guess, I kind of feel like petitgrain, because there isn't always that connection to lavender and sleep, it's one that could be diffused or used in a bath or used any type of way throughout the day as well to help manage stress a little bit more, couldn't it?
Yes, definitely. It's lovely in the bath. It's lovely as like a natural perfume. It's fantastic as an aroma pendant. Amazing for skincare, which I can talk about as well. We've talked about how it's got a lot of linalool and linalool acetate. These acetate chemicals are so calming and soothing to the skin and have skin regenerative properties. And we've got 3 big hitters within here. Excuse me, look. We've got linalool acetate, we've got geraniol acetate, and we've got nerol acetate. Now, nerol acetate is like a super molecule. In particular, in helichrysum, people will particularly go after a helichrysum that's grown in a certain part of the world, like Corsica or Sardinia, where naturally we have these high levels of nerol acetate because it's so good at healing and regenerating skin tissue. We also have decent amounts of geraniol acetate, and geraniol acetate is anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, but it also reinforces the skin barrier so that you don't lose so much water, and also you don't lose so many lipids. So if you have somebody who has very flaky skin, then this like flaky skin is almost like bricks with no mortar between them, and the lipids act like mortar between them. So once you put your oil on, and by that I mean like a fixed or like a carrier oil, it will hold it much better. But also linalool acetate, apart from all of these amazing stress reducing properties, also has an anti-psoriatic action. So things like psoriasis, eczema, dermatitis, all of those respond well to it as well. So as a package, it does so much for your skin. It is mildly astringent, so it's lovely in like cleansers and toners, but fantastic in moisturizers, nourishing creams, hand creams, foot creams, all of those things where you just want to pour in loads of goodness into the skin.
So basically, yeah, that was going to be one of my questions. You just answered it. Would it be better as with your cleanser or with your moisturizer? You're like, get it in any of your skincare products.
Get them in all of your skincare products.
Yeah, definitely. And that's where maybe with the different petitgrains, you could mix it up a little bit and have, the bitter orange petitgrain in your cleanser and maybe the lemon petitgrain in your moisturizer.
Yeah, I mean, what I would suggest before you did that is just see how you personally react to the lemon one or the grapefruit, because bear in mind, they come from very acidic, astringent fruits.
Yeah.
That nature is still there, even if the actual acid isn't so strong. So you might go, oh, no, that just doesn't match my skin. But orange petitgrain, absolutely lovely. And I always say about orange oil, and when I say this, I'm talking about sweet orange essential oil rather than bitter. But I always say it's a great oil if you feel like you've been hit with the ugly stick some morning, because it just makes your skin feel better. And that sort of orange loveliness does come through in the petitgrain. That's definitely better. Yeah.
Now, I must admit, for me, when it comes to petitgrain, the beauty aspect and the stress/sleep aspects are the two reasons I would reach for it on a physical level. Are there any other reasons you'd reach for petitgrain?
You can use it for so many different things. I mean, bear in mind, we're talking about the 5-HT1A receptor. That's the serotonin receptor. Serotonin's so important for mood modulation, but also for anything to do with sex, anything to do with digestion. So really, you're going right through the system. It's not one of those oils that you'd pick for, I feel ill with a cough or a cold. That's not it. This is everyday management of well-being rather than I am ill, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think so as well. So let's dive in a little bit more to kind of the deeper reasons you might use this. And what I really love about petitgrain is when we look at the relaxing nature of it from a chemistry level, but then we come back to the tree. So we referred before to it's got the beautiful fruit, and the fruit, the bitter orange, the sweet orange, they're very much to do with abundance. Now, neroli, in our video we did in neroli previously, we talked a lot about how neroli is really good for beckoning you outside of your comfort zone and for helping you to, step outside and do something a little bit different in that way. So there's these two rather bold oils in the orange and the neroli that really help us to get out there, be who we are, live an abundant life. And we all want that. And especially, as we come into a new year, people are very like, oh, I'm excited to do this or do that and so on. However, I know there are lots of people that always have big ambitions, big goals, big resolutions, and they always fall flat on their face. And for those types of people, I think petitgrain is absolutely amazing. Why? One, sometimes we have big goals, but we have no foundation. And one of the keywords I use for petitgrain is it's an oil of foundation. Before you go off and go and spend all this money on all these different things, have you thought about what is the big plan? What's the long-term plan? Just when we look at the tree, a tree that gives us this beautiful fruit that we all love, this beautiful blossoms that we all love. Before we can have that, we need the twigs, we need the branches, we need the leaves, we need the buds. We need those foundational things in order for our life to bear fruit and to blossom. And so I think it's a really great one to, whenever we're in a planning stage, or if we tend to skip that boring stage, this is where petitgrain can be absolutely amazing for helping us get a good foundation, plan what we want to do, and then step forward so that we do have more luck as well.
That's very similar to what I always say about it, really, in that I think it is about planning stages of things. And I think that I don't know if other people think the same way as I do, because obviously you can't experience that, can you? But when I have an idea, I can have an enormous universe in my head, and it will be absolutely intricately played out. And I'll try and explain it to somebody, and I can't quite get it there, it kind of needs to come into a 3D reality, and then even more so, putting it down on paper is incredibly difficult. And that is quite a sensitive and delicate stage, isn't it? Where you're like, I'm really excited about this. I know that this will really work. I can really see this really clearly. And then somebody goes, what? Don't get it. And that can be quite crushing to your ego and to the idea. And I think petitgrain's very good at going, no, just wait. You're okay. You can kind of get through this. Don't let this crush you. Just allow it to be. See where the flaws are in your plan. See where to take the constructive criticism. The small grains, the little seeds. We're at the little seeds stage. Yeah, I think it's very helpful from that point of view.
Yeah, from an astrological point of view, if we look at the astrological wheel, we'll notice that often those signs that are opposing each other or opposite each other in the wheel are kind of polar opposites. And when I think of petitgrain, I think of the Leo-Aquarius axis. So I often say Leos, if you know a Leo or if someone has a lot of Leo energy in their astrology, they're very much act now, think later. Whereas the Aquarians tend to think now, then have a bit more of a think, they'll ponder it a little bit more, and eventually they might act. And we obviously want to have that nice balance between where we're contemplating things that we're going to do. We're not doing things recklessly or without thought, but not that we're thinking too much and we're missing out on opportunities or opportunities that are passing us by. And I think Petitgrain works really nicely, kind of keeping that counterbalance of just like, make sure you've got a plan before you, and it kind of, anyone who is a bit more on that Leo side or that act without thinking, I think it kind of nudges us down towards that Aquarian aspect of like, let's just contemplate the bigger picture and the possible consequences and outcomes that could come from any decision or any action. And so I really love it for that kind of working on the Leo Aquarius axis.
I think that's really good. I couldn't really come up with one, to be honest. I thought maybe Mercury from the communications point of view, but no, that's good. Yeah. I ain't got one.
Yeah, from a planetary point of view, I'd then give it to Uranus, which, Uranus may seem, hold on, how does that work? It's all about planning. But it's kind of a foundational oil in the Uranus alchemy of like, for transformation to happen, which is what Uranus is all about, for it to be successful, there must be the plans in there. So that's why I kind of like it in there. And I find neroli and the whole tree, the bitter orange tree, works really well with Uranus energy in my experience.
Yeah, and sun energy.
Yeah, of course, being a citrus, part of the citrus oils. The other thing I've found, I've been working with the Abraham Hicks vibrational emotional scale, which talks about, that we have low vibration emotions, things like fear and grief, and we want to move up there. And I've been looking at how we could work with our essential oils in that way. And I'm finding that the petitgrains are really, really beautiful for that state where we get kind of bored, apathy, can't be bothered, uninspired. And I think a lot of the time there are so many influences out in the world that are telling us what we should be doing with our life and what women, where we should be, what we should be paying attention to, that we often forget to check in with ourselves and we lose who we are. And we get, we're bored with life, and probably because we're not actually doing what we want to do. A classic example of that I find when I'm doing tarot readings for what I like to call empty nesters, women in maybe around their 50s, that have spent maybe the last 20 to 25 years raising children, and their children have been their life. Now, the children have all buggered off. They don't need mum anymore. And she's kind of sitting home going, I don't know what to do. And working with Petitgrain of like, hold on, who am I? What's important to me and what do I want to do? And in a world that is always telling us what we're meant to be doing, and other people, if we don't fill it with our own desires, other people will fill it with their intentions of like, can you help me with this? Can you do this for me? You need to do that. That we actually don't, we lose who we are and we find life boring because we're living someone else's life, not our own. So if you're finding that, again, working with Petitgrain, what do I really want? Getting back to the basics of who you are. And a really good question to even ask yourself is, what makes me happy or what is fun? Because someone asked me that about 10, 12 years ago, what makes me happy? And I actually struggled to answer that question without depending on another thing or another person to make me happy.
I think that's really interesting from a coincidental point of view, really, because when you're talking about this mothering aspect, we're talking about the Demeter archetype. And she is goddess of agriculture. Her Roman archetype is Ceres, the cereal goddess, and we're talking about petitgrains, little seeds. So that's interesting, but it's a coincidence because, of course, it's a fruit, but it's often you get those funny little. Well, that's very strange, but I think that you're absolutely right, and from the point of view of the chakra, I would say so. Sacral chakra, that sort of the orange energy of. I always say to people that the root chakra is what I need. The sacral chakra is what I want. And full of that juicy creativity. And as you say, those things, those passions that get lost under piles of washing, and you forget who you are really, and to bring that back in. And I agree, petitgrains, that's definitely that kind of energy.
Yeah, I tend to lean like I can see definitely it would be a great sacral chakra oil. I do find with the orange petitgrain that I like it with the base just to get back to basics and the core and that type of thing as well. But I think it's definitely it's never going to be a third eye chakra oil. It's definitely those lower. Let's settle. Let's get down to basics. Let's build that foundation of who we are, what we want, and what we want to do in our lives.
Yeah, it's just I'll say what I said before. We're talking about it from a spiritual point of view now. I'll say the same as I said from a physical point of view, because that often runs across. It's an everyday wellness oil that, I'm just looking after me.
Yeah. So it probably just to kind of summarize that, it's one that we can, and they're normally quite affordable as well. It's one to be running in a diffuser, to have in your skincare, to just have it around that, maybe it might be something just to use a bit more during the day. Leave your lavender for night or something else for night and that type of thing, just to kind of elevate the mood but help you handle stress and keep your feet on the ground.
Yeah, and the other thing is, like, from a physics point of view, your brain will forget. It will stop smelling something after an hour, because it's the whole point of smell is to alert you to your environment and new things that are happening, going on around you. So after an hour, your brain goes, clearly you know about that. I'm going to focus my attention on something else. And which is why people will often say, oh, my diffuser doesn't work for very long. Excuse me. It does. Your brain's switched it off. So if you really think, oh, I want to use this linalool acetate and the linalool, and I'm going to focus my attention on getting calm through that, well, that's a really clever thing to do then, isn't it? To go, I'll have an hour lavender, I'll switch my aroma pendant over or my diffuser over to petitgrain. You're still using that medicine, and you're really training your brain to work overtime, rather than it going, right, I've had enough now, I'm going for a sit down or to the shed to read my paper. No, you're not. I'm going to make you do it in a different way now.
And I guess the good thing that we were talking about at the start is that there are different petitgrains, and using a different one each day of the week could be really quite powerful, because the aromas are quite different, that you're not just like, oh, it's the same old oil over and over again. Yeah. So that's petitgrain. Anything else that you think that needs to be mentioned about petitgrain?
No, I mean, it's very safe. It's maximum dilution 3%, but that's just, you could go more than that if you really wanted to. Can't use it in the first 16 weeks pregnancy.
So the last thing I want to share with you is those last minute Lucy's. We've had a bit of a break over the holiday period, but we will be back with our masterclass happening in the first few days of February. The link is below, as well as the discount code if you haven't got your ticket yet. We're doing it just a few days before Valentine's Day, because everyone's going to be thinking about love. Even if you're not thinking about love, everyone else is going to be talking about it. So we might as well talk about it as well. And we're going to give you some great tips. We're going to look at everything from love, romance. We're going to get sexual, not on the video, but we'll give you some sex tips. And we're even going to go into soulmates as well. And so many of the oils that we're talking about over the last couple of months all tie into that really beautifully. So make sure you buy or grab your ticket for the masterclass.
Yeah, and so as many of you know, I've written a book called 50 Shades of Fragrance, and how essential oils can really help with libido and all of those kind of things. And I'll talk a little bit about how stress can affect sexuality as well, to tie in with what we've been talking about with the petitgrain today.
So that is all from a very generous tree. We hope that we've given you all you need to know about petitgrain. We'll see you in the masterclass, and we'll see you next week when we dive into another oil. Until then, take care.
Bye-bye.